Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're heading north. Well, I guess technically it depends on where you are, but geographically north to this really cool archipelago
Oh, cool.
called Åland. So have you ever heard of Åland?
I have heard of Åland. Yeah.
Okay, well, just for our listeners, Åland is this really stunning archipelago nestled in the Baltic Sea. Picture like rugged red granite cliffs and
Hmm.
charming little harbors and sunsets. Oh, the sunsets.
Sounds idyllic.
Oh yeah. I mean, even the most jaded Instagram influencer would be swooning. But we're not just here for the pretty pictures, are we? We're going deep into the evolution of Åland's tourism and economy since the turn of the millennium.
Ooh, the Y2K, huh?
The Y2Ks, exactly. And our guide for this journey is a collection of documents by this guy, Mats Adamzak. And he's pretty interesting. He's a data marketing whiz, I guess you could call him that. But he's been a big advocate for Åland's businesses.
Oh, that's cool. So like a local champion for their growth and development.
Yeah, exactly. So you get this kind of like a local's perspective, but also someone who's like, data driven, looking at the bigger picture.
That's great. I always find it so fascinating to hear from people who are really, really passionate about a particular place, especially when they have that kind of expertise to back it up.
Right. And this deep dive, I think, is so compelling because Olan's story is it's like a microcosm of the global shifts we've all been through. The rise of the internet, the always-on consumer, the changing, face of travel. It's all playing out on this little archipelago.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could really see how these global trends have played out in different ways in different places.
So let's set the stage. Before the internet took over our lives and became our best friend and our worst enemy, back in the late 90s, remember?
Vaguely, I was there, but it's a bit of a blur.
Okay, so back when travel brochures were like the treasure maps, and a wild trip meant like navigating a Thomas Cook train timetable,
Ah, the good old days.
Åland was a tourism star. They were actually outperforming their rivals. So places like Gotland and Bornholm, um, and they were drawing in a ton of overnight stays. What was their secret sauce back then?
Well, their strategy was pretty simple, really. They were catering to very specific high-spending tourists.
Yeah.
So golfers, anglers, people looking for that kind of classic, cottage getaway. Olin had the whole package deal,
And it worked.
and it worked. Yeah, back in the pre-internet era, that was the way to do it.
And let's not forget the social scene, right? Like nightclubs were the place to be. And those duty-free booze cruises. Legendary.
Oh yeah, a different era.
Totally different world. Almost quaint, right? Compared to how we travel now.
Yeah, it was a different rhythm, that's for sure.
Uh-huh.
Package tours, fixed schedule, Monday to Sunday.
Right.
Travelers had less control, but there was a certain simplicity to it all.
Simplicity. That's a good word for it. But
Yeah.
then came the digital tsunami, right? Like everything changed. It wasn't just travel. Banking went online. Spotify changed how we listened to music. Netflix changed movie nights. Suddenly everything was on demand.
Instant gratification nation.
Did that have a big impact on how people approach travel, do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, people got used to having control, to choosing what they wanted, when they wanted it, and travel was no exception. It, completely changed how people thought about planning and taking trips.
Yeah, and that must have had a seismic effect on these traditional tourism models, especially in places like Åland that were built on that more, predictable pre-internet world.
Yeah, I mean, for a place like Holland that had been so successful with that, kind of set package, fixed schedule approach, this was a huge shift. They had to adapt.
So how did Åland's tourism ship weather this digital storm? Because it sounds like their bread and butter, those package tours and the classic cruise experience. I mean, that must have taken a hit.
Yeah, you're spot on. The maritime tourism industry, which was once, huge for Oland's economy, it started to struggle.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, remember those booze cruises and that whole nightlife scene?
Hard to forget.
Well, things like declining smoking and alcohol consumption, changing dating habits, the rise of budget airlines, flying to, warmer places. All of that chipped away at the appeal of that classic cruise experience.
I mean, it makes sense, right? Like people just have so many more options now, and they're looking for more tailored experiences. What about those land-based package tours? Did they do any better?
Not really. I mean, they still had some appeal for certain types of tourists, the diehard fishing enthusiasts, dedicated cyclists,
Oh.
but it lacked flexibility.
Ah.
It's like, imagine walking into a massive supermarket and only being allowed to shop in a couple of aisles.
Limited option.
That's what it felt like for independent travelers in Åland.
Yeah.
They wanted to explore the whole store, but the options were just limited.
And to add to that, getting around the island without a car, nightmare. I mean, you mentioned earlier that Åland was, topping the charts in overnight stays.
Right.
Was that because people were, lingering longer, or just because it was such a mission to get off the island?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And that's actually where the lack of data starts to become a real problem.
Uh-huh.
They weren't collecting the kind of information that would tell us the average length of stay, the reasons behind those stays.
Okay, so we've got this picture of Åland's, tried and true tourism model starting to crack as the digital age takes hold.
Right.
But it sounds like this lack of data, this is maybe an even bigger issue. Was this something that Adam Zak was highlighting in his work?
Oh, absolutely. He was a huge proponent of data-driven marketing.
Mm.
And he saw a real blind spot in Åland's approach.
Like they were missing a key ingredient.
It's like trying to navigate a maze blindfolded. You might stumble on the right path every now and then, but without a map, you're going to get lost.
Lost in the data maze. So Åland is facing this double whammy, changing traveler behavior and a lack of data to really help them adapt. But what's fascinating is that even back then in the early 2000s, this idea of niche tourism, it was starting to emerge. And Adam Zak actually coined this term, nerd tourism. What did he mean by that?
Well, he was talking about those travelers who are deeply passionate about their hobbies and willing to go, the extra mile, literally, to indulge in them.
Mm.
And so think dedicated hikers, bird watchers, history buffs, even disc golfers, these nerds, as he called them. They were looking for authentic, specialized experiences, and they were using the internet to find them.
And Åland, with its, stunning natural landscapes and unique culture, it seems like it'd be a perfect playground for these nerd tourists, right?
You would think. But the question is, was Åland tapping into that potential back then? And that's where things get really interesting.
So we've got nerd tourism emerging as this potential bright spot, but at the same time, Åland is, dealing with these shifts in the tourism world and this lack of data. Were there any other big hurdles that Adam Zak identified in his work?
Oh yeah, there was one really significant one, and probably the most controversial one, and that was the impact of the tax border.
Okay, this sounds a little wonky, but walk me through this. Why is the tax border such a big deal for Åland?
So imagine you're online, browsing your favorite store, ready to hit buy on that new gadget or that cozy sweater. But then you realize, because you're in Åland, you either can't order it at all, or you're faced with like crazy shipping costs and delays.
Frustrating.
Super frustrating. That's the reality for residents and businesses because of this tax border.
So what is this tax border? What are we talking about here? Why does it even exist?
It's complicated. It's rooted in Åland's unique political status as an autonomous region of Finland. So they're part of Finland, but they have their own parliament and a special tax system.
Okay, so they're like their own little entity within Finland.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this means that goods moving between Åland and mainland Finland or coming from outside the EU are subject to customs duties and VAT.
So it's like this extra layer of bureaucracy.
Yeah, it's like a bureaucratic nightmare, especially in today's world of, seamless e-commerce.
I can only imagine. And Adam Zak was pretty vocal about this, about how this was impacting businesses.
Oh, he was not shy about it at all. He said it was killing entrepreneurship on the island.
Wow, that's pretty intense. Give me an example. How does this tax border actually play out in the real world?
So let's say you're a small business owner in Åland. You make beautiful handmade crafts, and you want to sell them online. Reaching customers outside of Åland becomes incredibly difficult. Higher shipping costs, customs paperwork, potential delays. It makes your products less competitive.
Yeah, it just adds this whole other layer of complication.
And it's not just businesses, right?
Yeah.
Imagine ordering something online and having to wait weeks for it to arrive, paying like inflated prices.
Yeah.
It creates this feeling of isolation and limits access to things that most people just take for granted.
So what was Adam Zak's solution here? I mean, can this tax border just be dismantled?
He knew that eliminating it entirely was a long shot, politically speaking. but he really pushed for making it invisible, streamlining processes,
Mm.
reducing these bureaucratic hurdles. He believed that would unlock the potential of e-commerce, allowing businesses to thrive and residents to have the same online shopping experience as everyone else.
I mean, that sounds like a pretty reasonable approach. I imagine there are some pros and cons to consider, though, right?
Of course, of course. On the one hand, making the border invisible, it could really stimulate economic growth, attract new businesses, create jobs. It would also, improve the quality of life for residents, giving
Yeah.
them easier access to goods and services. But on the other hand, there are concerns about, potential loss of tax revenue for Åland, concerns about tax avoidance, people exploiting the system.
So it's a balancing act, trying to find a way to reduce the burden of this tax border without jeopardizing Åland's autonomy or economic stability.
It's a tough one. It's complex. But, Adam Zach's work really, it got people talking. It started this important debate about how to bring Åland's economic model into the digital age.
And it's not just about the tax border, right? We've got this parallel story of nerd tourism, gaining momentum. Did Adam Zach see a connection between these two threads?
Oh, absolutely. He saw niche tourism as a way to kind of work around the limitations of the tax border. So think about it. If Åland becomes known as a global hub for example, disc golf or bird watching, attracting all these passionate enthusiasts from all over the world, they could generate a lot of revenue through tourism, even with the tax border in place.
So it's about leveraging Åland's unique strengths to create a tourism sector that's less reliant on these old models and less impacted by the whole tax border situation. But we've also talked about this lack of data as a major obstacle. What did Adam Zach propose for that? How do they fix that?
He was adamant that Åland needed to start collecting serious data on its visitors, demographics, motivations, length of stay, spending habits, all of it.
So like really understanding who their tourists are.
Exactly. And that information would allow them to understand their audience, tailor marketing campaigns, measure the effectiveness of their initiatives, make smarter decisions about tourism development.
It sounds like he was really pushing for a complete overhaul of their whole approach to tourism.
He was, but data collection is just the first step.
Right.
The question is, how do you actually use that information to improve the offerings and attract those niche tours? He envisioned a future where Åland had this amazing user-friendly website or app,
Yeah.
that showcased all of the island's unique experiences.
Yeah.
From the hiking trails and bird watching spots to historical sites and cultural events.
Yeah.
Imagine this platform where you can easily find information, book accommodations, connect with local guides, customize your itinerary.
It's about creating that seamless experience for the modern traveler who wants to explore, discover, connect with the destination on a deeper level, not just, follow a prepackaged tour.
Precisely. Yeah. And by gathering data on what those travelers are looking for, Åland could really tailor its offerings to meet those demands. Identify emerging trends, develop new experiences, and market them to the right audience.
So it's this multi-pronged approach. Embrace niche tourism, figure out the tax border situation, and use data to make better decisions. That's a tall order. Did Adam Zach have any concrete examples of how this would all work in practice?
Oh, he did. He had specific ideas for transportation improvements, targeted marketing campaigns, even creative ways to use the existing infrastructure to create new experiences.
Okay, I'm hooked. Let's get into the nitty gritty. How would Åland actually pull this off? All right, so we've laid out the big challenges, the big strategies, but now I wanna get into the details. Like what were some of those specific tactics that Adam Zach had in mind to actually transform Åland's tourism?
Well, one area he really focused on was transportation. The island is beautiful, but getting around, especially if you don't have a car, it can be a bit of a hassle.
Yeah. I can imagine that being a major roadblock, literally, for anyone wanting to, see more than just Mariema. Did he have any specific ideas on how to improve that?
He did. He suggested creating a more integrated and user-friendly transportation system. So think like a a network of well-maintained cycling paths,
Hmm.
connecting key attractions, scenic routes. He also proposed expanding and streamlining the ferry system, making it easier for visitors to hop between islands, explore the archipelago.
That would be amazing. I mean, that would open up so much. Instead of, feeling stuck in one place, visitors could create their own little island hopping adventure.
Exactly. And remember those nerd tourists we were talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah.
He had some really, really cool ideas for catering to those niche markets. So he suggested developing like dedicated trails and facilities for things like mountain biking, trail running, even bouldering.
Wait, bouldering in Åland. That I never would have thought of that. That's brilliant though, because it really plays to Åland's unique landscape. I mean, those rugged granite cliffs and the coastal views.
It's perfect. And he wasn't just throwing out, random ideas. He was really looking at Olin's existing assets
Yeah.
and thinking about how to leverage them in new ways.
And it wasn't just about the infrastructure. He also talked about targeted marketing. So how to reach those specific groups of travelers.
Right. So think like online ads in niche publications,
Hmm.
collaborations with influencers in the outdoor adventure space, even hosting events, competitions to draw in those enthusiasts.
So instead of, trying to be everything to everyone, Åland could become a haven for like the hardcore bouldering fans or the trail running fanatics.
Exactly. It's about focusing their energy and resources on the people who are really passionate and will actively seek out those unique experiences.
Makes sense. But all of this, it sounds like it requires a pretty significant shift in how Åland thinks about tourism, how they spend their tourism budget.
Oh yeah, for sure. He pointed out that a large portion of the tourism budget was going towards events like the annual Harvest Festival, which, it's culturally significant,
Right.
but it might not be the most effective way to attract new visitors to drive, long-term growth.
So it's about being more strategic, right? Shifting some of that funding towards these initiatives that align with this new vision.
Yep.
Supporting those niche activities, those digital platforms, the off-season events.
It's about making sure every euro is working towards creating a sustainable and thriving tourism sector. But it's not just about the money. He also talked about the importance of community buy-in.
So getting the locals on board.
Absolutely. He said that any successful tourism strategy needs the support and participation of the people who live there.
And that makes sense. It's about creating that sense of ownership, of pride, ensuring that tourism actually benefits the whole community, not just a select few.
And that's where Åland's unique culture and that close-knit community could really, really shine.
Right. I mean, imagine a future where you visit Åland and you can connect with local artisans, food producers, cultural organizations.
He envisioned a future where all of that was integrated into the tourism experience. So you could visit a local farm, learn about traditional crafts, attend a concert showcasing Ålandic folk music. It's about creating a rich and authentic tapestry that goes beyond the typical tourist traps.
It sounds like Adam Sack really had a really holistic vision for Åland's tourism future. It wasn't just about, bringing in more tourists. It was about creating a sustainable model that benefits the community, the environment, the economy. It's inspiring to see someone thinking so deeply about the long-term impact of tourism, especially back in the early 2000s when these ideas were pretty new.
And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating, right? It's not just about this one small island. It's like a glimpse into the future of tourism itself.
Mm.
The challenges that Åland was facing, the solutions that Adam Zach proposed, they're relevant to destinations all over the world.
Right, right. Everyone's grappling with these same forces of digital disruption and changing expectations. So what's the takeaway for our listeners? What can they learn from Åland's story?
The key message is that adaptation is key. The
Yeah.
world is changing, and the tourism industry has to evolve to stay relevant. And that means embracing data, understanding niche markets, leveraging technology, creating experiences that go beyond just the superficial. It's about finding that balance between economic growth, environmental responsibility, and community well-being.
And maybe most importantly, it's about having the courage to challenge the way things have always been done, to think outside the box and imagine a future where tourism is a force for good.
Just like Matt Adamsack did for Åland.
And that wraps up our deep dive into Åland's tourism and economy. We hope you found it insightful, thought-provoking, and maybe even a little bit inspiring. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.